So, debates are raging on the authenticity of the authorship of the Book of Mormon. DNA analysis has brought on heavy debates having to do with whether or not there could have possibly been an Israelite immigration to the Americas. We hear of the Jaredites, their elephants, Kurlongs, Cumans, and honeybees, 2200 BC, and we hear of the family of Lehi, the Nephites and Lamanites, coming over at 600 BC. However, DNA analysis of Native American peoples have shown results of 99.4% of them having their ancestry out of Northeast Asia, like around Siberia. Are these people Eskimos in disguise, parading as Israelites? Well, we're not going to analyze DNA and go into a lot of scientifics, but we are going to go into the Book of Mormon, because there are a lot of promises, prophecies, and very strange stories in the Book of Mormon, as well as the discussion of doctrines associated with patriarchal blessings. Patriarchal blessings having to do with race, lineage, and worthiness are all important in LDS doctrine. The children of Lehi, as they have been told they are at temple dedications and other events by general authorities, including the presidents of the church, tend to receive patriarchal blessings, telling them that they are from the tribe of Manasseh, an Israelite tribe, Nephi's tribe, or at least his daddy's. So there are a lot of clues in the Book of Mormon we can look at about this subject and how the brethren seem to be reacting to the evidence through their essay writers, whose material they emphatically have shown approval of, officially approving it on the introduction to the Gospel Topics essays, where they also state that they're going to give us an in-depth, straightforward essay. That's what they said they were promising, and they said the Lord doesn't want us to have just one set of opinions. However, instead of delivering exactly that, it seems that they've come up with a rather one-sided approach designed to bring us to a particular conclusion, which often is that we just don't have adequate data to make a determination through reason, and we need to pray about it in order to find truth. However, they somehow conspicuously ignore much of the most pertinent data and use a bunch of filler in a lot of their essays. And the most amazing part is how they ignore the scriptures. Then again, they keep coming up with conclusions and making statements that tend to absolutely contradict the scriptures, as they do in the DNA essay, as well as very obviously in the race and priesthood, which are both very pertinent to this entire plausibility of the assertion that Jesus Christ has restored the gospel and is guiding the church, and that the Book of Mormon and other scriptures are truly inspired directly of God, a God who does not lie, as the brother of Jared told us. Thou art a God of truth and canst not lie, in Ether chapter 3. Of course, right after he said that, the Lord told him that he was the first to ever see him, which conflicts heavily with what happened with Enoch, Adam, and all the patriarchs in Doctrine and Covenants 107 and Moses chapter 7. We're not going to worry about that too much in this one. What we are going to do is delve into the scriptures that pertain to this subject and see if they support or conflict with what the brethren are telling us through their essay writers. So how does the DNA of the Israelite Lamanites figure into this, and how does it relate to their patriarchal blessings received in the church?
So, Lehi is the descendant of Manasseh, says the Book of Mormon. Manasseh being the son of Joseph, sold into Egypt, an Israelite. It doesn't mention what his wife is in terms of tribe. Now, Nephi and the boys are sent back their third time, going all the way from the Red Sea back to Jerusalem, and check the mileage. It's 150 to 240 or so miles away, depending if it's a tributary or the real thing. Quite a walk, especially for 3 days wandering in the wilderness, as it says. So anyway, they made this amazing trek back and forth. came back to Jerusalem after murdering Laban and hoping there weren't any wanted dead or alive posters out for them, since they'd kidnapped his servant and the plates of brass were gone, that they'd already been to his house twice to try to convince him that they wanted. So you'd think they were prime suspects. He was quite the man about town. Anyway, they went back and convinced Ishmael and his family to come with them, so they'd have some girls to marry, it says, basically. It says that Ishmael was a descendant of Ephraim. Zoram, who was the servant of Laban that got kidnapped, I believe he was from Ephraim, it may mention. I may be wrong on that. So all these folks come to the Americas. Now, we get patriarchal blessings in the church. Pretty much most people that join the church, if they're white at least, are told their lineage, and almost always they're a descendant of Ephraim. Now, when the Lamanites join the church, unless I'm wrong on this, it's my impression that they all tend to be from Manasseh. One other little factor in there. The Mulekites came, and then they joined up with the Nephites at some point there. The Mulekites involved Jews, one of the sons of King Zedekiah, who escaped with his life and wasn't slain in front of his father. So you have people from the tribe of Judah, Ephraim, and Manasseh mixed into this Nephite group that became, mixed in with the Lamanites back and forth. The Lamanites joined up with them when they repented, and they turned white again, and then, anyway, they got zapped and turned dark when whoever became unfaithful. So anyway, the Nephites were all killed, but they were all, Lamanites came from pretty much the same gene pool. But how many people of Native American or American Indian or Latino, as they're called, which is generally anybody with some darkness in their skin from south of the U.S. border originally, tends to be a mixture of the Native American and Spaniards, unless it's farther south and it's, with some other European. So anyway, bottom line is, if they got this Native American Lamanite DNA, why are they always from Manasseh? What about the other two that were there? They got people from Ephraim, one family from Ephraim, at least the dad, one family from Manasseh, and then another group of people from Judah, supposedly, assuming they're all the same, which may be wrong, but, so we've mentioned 3 tribes, but everybody's always from Manasseh. And if they're Pacific Islanders, they're always from Manasseh. Is that because we think that the Lamanites got in canoes and rowed to Samoa and Hawaii and Tonga? Is that in Fiji? Is that kind of what has been inferred in the past? And as I recall, the Book of Mormon, by the way, said that the Lamanites were indolent, lazy, worthless. Doesn't say worthless, but it essentially does. Indolent, lazy, idle, but the Nephites were industrious. It mentions the Nephites building some ships and sailing to the land northward. It doesn't work too well for the limited geography theory for the Book of Mormon either, especially when it said they spread from the sea east to the sea west, the sea north to the sea south. The sea north? Well, anyway. So, the people that built ships, they were going to the land northward. And they were Nephites. Industrious, white Nephites. Not the lazy, brown Lamanites. So, if industrious white Nephites sailed or built canoes or did something and made it all, instead of going north, they went south and went to Tonga and Samoa, and they went to Hawaii and all these other Pacific islands and so forth. So God just turned them all brown because they all turned bad. The only reason to turn them brown was to separate them from the good people who God left them white, unless they got too wicked. Then he let the brown people kill them. So is that what happened in Tonga and Samoa and all the Hawaiian islands, formerly called the Sandwich Islands, before the United States sent Christian missionaries there, which immediately seemed to coincide with civil disturbance and revolution, and then the United States decides to annex the territories, kind of the classic move there of imperial expansion. So, yeah, Everywhere else in the same theory is what happened because those Lamanites were too lazy to build canoes. The Book of Mormon tells us. So it only could be the good white Nephites. So they all got turned brown and killed off their white brothers when they got to Tonga, Samoa, all of Polynesia, and the Hawaiian Islands, and everywhere else that people are baptized into the church and given patriarchal blessings that declare their lineage as Manasseh, the only tribe that seems to have made it through in the American Indian Polynesian, despite the fact that there are 3 tribes named in the group intermarrying. Anyway, I just thought that was always kind of a tough one to wrap your mind around. Interestingly, the DNA from most of these Pacific Islanders, well, I don't have all these studies. I've just read that Southeast Asia tends to come up in at least some or many of the Pacific Islanders. Southeast Asia. And then we've got Northeast Asia for the folks in the Americas and their DNA testing. But maybe we can just throw out, if we throw out all the DNA, we still got all these people were from Manasseh, it says, even though you had 3 tribes come over to the Americas. And on top of that, there's another issue related to that. 3 major races, Negroid, Mongoloid, and Caucasoid, they have more differences than skin. So, when God cursed the Lamanites over here, somehow they became full-on Mongoloid. They've got Mongoloid skulls. Why is that? Did he curse their skulls? Is that what he did? And how did the Mongoloids get that way in Asia? Were they naughty too? So God cursed them, and we just don't have the scriptures to tell us about that. We've got the limited record in the Bible, which said there was a mark put on Cain. We've got the Canaanites turning black after they murdered the people of Shem in Moses chapter 7. And then we've got that convoluted connection between them. Besides, they're named after Canaan, the son of Ham, who was centuries after them. It doesn't say exactly when they were, but actually it does say that Enoch decided to not go preach to them. So who knows who they're named after, because they weren't named after the patriarch Canaan, because that's spelled differently. Actually, it's a pretty weird story, because it kind of makes it sound like they're the descendants of Cain in the scriptures, but they got turned black, so they must not have already been black. And the seed of Cain, it says in the same chapter, were black. It doesn't say when they turned black, but you got to assume that was when the mark was put upon Cain, because in the Book of Mormon it keeps saying that the Lamanites that God set a mark upon them, and it was the dark skin. It says that numerous times. Also, Joseph Smith translation of the Bible, Genesis chapter 9, when Canaan's being cursed to be a servant because his dad saw Grandpa naked when he was drunk, Joseph Smith goes ahead and adds on in there. Click on servant, and you can see it says, "A veil of darkness shall cover him." That's Canaan. "That all men may know him." So they can visibly see a veil of darkness over him. That would have to be his skin, unless there's a cloud following everybody in that particular lineage. So he goes ahead and makes that clear to us. So anyway, these people are all cursed. That's how we get these other races. That's what the scriptures are telling us. The LDS scriptures are telling us. Well, the LDS gospel topic essays say that God created all the diverse races and ethnicity and holds them all equal. That doesn't sound like it when it says basically the reason that that there are other races besides the white race is to separate them and to curse them. That's the whole reason they came into being, was to separate them, like from the Nephites or whoever they were around. So it's also so anyway, they get other body features, different types of skulls, different types of hair, other features that are somewhat different. And of course, Brigham Young tells us that the blacks were cursed with a flat nose in addition. So that's one thing you can see. There are various differences that people have in their body, so God didn't just change the skin. he got rather creative, apparently. So how did it happen to the folks in Asia? All those people that just seem to have the same DNA as the folks in America that used to be said to be the principal ancestors of the American Indian. And of course now it says they're among the ancestors of them. In the preface to the Book of Mormon, as the church has backpedaled quite a bit after the DNA research came out. Anyway, put all those things together. Patriarchal blessings I always thought was interesting. Three tribes, but only Manasseh is what the Lamonite blessings come out as far as I've ever heard. I also mentioned in another excerpt, not in this particular video, that the patriarchal blessing business teaches the same thing as regarding, your station in this life was determined by how valiant you were in the premortal existence. It says that in patriarchal blessings. It always says because you were so valiant, that's why you're in position to be born through Ephraim or whatnot. That's the same doctrine that was taught, say, why people were born through Cain and couldn't receive the priesthood, or why they were born Chinese and didn't have good opportunities 50 years ago when they were talking about that. Marky Peterson would talk about that in conference talks. It's the same doctrine. It's still being taught. They just don't mention it about black people being cursed. Although the Gospel Topics essay on race and priesthood says that that's just a false theory, that they disavow it. It also says God hated the Lamanites. The Nephites hath he loved, but the Lamanites hath he hated. When we actually think through the things that are being taught, they get tough.
Some of the factual problems with those essays are, well, they actually deny that God cursed anyone with dark skin, that it was any sign of divine disfavor or there was a curse. And actually, it's almost word for word what it says in 2 Nephi chapter 5 and Alma chapter 3. Also, in the Book of Mormon, we read that the Lord God preserved this land and protected it against the knowledge of other nations, so that the Lamanites and the Nephites, particularly the Nephites, the seed of Lehi, would have the land unto themselves. It says they've inhabited from the sea west, the sea east, to the sea north, the sea south. I don't even know what the North Sea is. Covered the face of the land. Yet the Gospel Topic essays now tell us that they just disappeared into a huge existing population, which they hint would be pre-Adamite people that survived the flood as well as lived before. With all that being the case, it's no wonder they don't like to use the scriptures in the Gospel Topics essays, because they contradict them, and that's a problem. Facts seem to be a problem. History seems to be a problem. Archaeology, science, everything that would normally verify something that's true seems to be a problem as a reference for the Gospel Topics essay writers. So, the brethren really seem to have a problem with the truth, is what the problem seems to be. And see if you can see the doctrines that I discussed being taught by example right in your own blessing. Sometimes the truth is hiding right in plain sight, or just under your nose.
So what we see is that the brethren, the apostles and prophets, seem to keep changing the doctrine, and they are changing the story. Joseph Smith said that the angel told him that he and his people, the Nephites and the Lamanites, were the principal ancestors of the American Indians. They were the source from which they sprang. Well, now we see the preface to the Book of Mormon has been changed after the pressure comes from the DNA studies that show that that can't really possibly be the case. I hear people arguing about that. However, the church seems to have showed its hand. when they make those kind of changes. Now, the Book of Mormon says that the Jaredites got here, basically right after the flood. And then, of course, Jeffrey Holland affirms that in his talk, 1976 talk. Actually, it wasn't a talk. It was an Insight article. And he says that land had been washed, cleaned, and it was, it was the promised land, and the Lord repopulated it with Jaredites. However, now they're suggesting that it was a pre-Adamite people. That's right, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, throwing out the whole Genesis story, and saying, yeah, there were lots of people existing here when Lehi's family got here, and they just mixed into a vast existing population. Well, the Book of Mormon completely contradicts that. He says that the land was preserved for them, their inheritance. It was a promised land. They don't mention other people. They say they inhabited, they filled the whole land, and then these populations managed to slaughter each other. Yet they're doing that as they've mixed into another population. Makes no sense at all. It's constant contradiction. Kind of like Nephi says, so we left Jerusalem, our family, which consisted of me and my brothers and our parents, basically. Later, when he splits off from Laman and Lemuel, he says he takes his sisters with him. What sisters? It's like that throughout the whole story. If you pay attention to the details, they really tell a different story. They tell a story that is convoluted and that contrasts and contradicts itself, contradicts other LDS scripture, contradicts science, history, genetics, contradicts everything that verifies something is true. Just like the Book of Abraham does. Just like Abraham, my name is Jehovah. Abraham, his name was Abram at that time according to the Bible. And Jehovah is a word that Catholic priests made up 3,000 years later, like 1370 AD or something. I mean, Book of Abraham is just full of that stuff. Egypt, Pharaoh, good grief. False definitions for everything. But there's a separate video on that. It's pretty good. You got to take a look at it. Take a look at the race of priesthood and the other DNA videos, because we get deeper into scripture there as well, referencing exactly where these contradictions are. It's an interesting process, and we've seen that the church has backpedaled on issue after issue. The truth just keeps changing, it seems. What was true in Joseph Smith's time are false theories now. The theories of men. But what men were they? They were the prophets who spoke God's truth. I think we're starting to see what this is all about. So I hope you've enjoyed the presentation from Mormon Truth Video Library on the Dodger Game channel.